I just watched the Vampire Lestat episode 6, and I knew this was coming, but I never knew it would be so soon and so brutal. Welcome back, everyone. Today we are here to talk about the Vampire Lestat season 1, episode 6, Montreal. And I am very excited to be talking about this episode because there was a lot going on in this one, and there's a lot of stuff that I'm really enjoying so far this season that is beautifully coming together. We got one episode left, and I can't wait to see how they end this show, this season of the show. I'm assuming the Vampire Lestat's going to be only one season. And I know up to this point, I've also been referring to it as season 3 because they said they were going to just be retitling the show, but it would still be a continuation. So yeah, I'll go back to season 1 because some people seem to be confused when I say that, but just wanted to clarify. But before we get into this review, I also have a question for you. I want to know, in the Vampire Chronicles, in the Immortal Universe, who is your favorite ship? Or even maybe outside of it. Let me know who your favorite ship is down in the comments below. I loved the idea of coming full circle with Lestat, with him sort of starting out on this journey on Halloween night. That's when his band formed, and it was a very tumultuous evening for him. And I believe it would have been, I guess, probably a year ago in the story of this show. So flash forward, of course, to a year later at Halloween. And who is Lestat spending it with? He's spending it with Louis. And they're going about, and they're going to Lestat's, dress rehearsal for the concerts. And they're having dinner together at Louis' restaurants. And they're maybe going to go see a witch, see about talking to a ghost of someone that matters to both of them. And I just loved all of that. It felt like it was really beautiful. Wrapping up the interview with Daniel. They're doing all of these things together and just getting to see how they come together after all this time. And that chemistry as well between Jacob and Sam on screen. I mean, it's completely undeniable. They are so great together. They have such good on-screen chemistry, and the idea of who these characters are and why they feel that pull to one another and why they struggle and they have problems, I thought was beautifully showcased in this episode. I mean, we'll talk about Gabriella in a little bit, but that idea of the rift between them coming from Lestat's relationship with Gabriella, who used to be his mother in her mortal life, that whole collapse, it's so perfect because I initially, when I was watching the episode and I was doing my reaction for the episode, which you can catch my reactions here on the channel as a Golden Fanging member or over on my Patreon where I do the full reactions, I was saying I feel like sometimes we focus on the wrong things with the Lestat and Gabriella relationship and it becomes sensationalized in this show, like it's all about the shock factor. But I think really the reason why they needed to pull that in for Louis is because it's showing you the difference between Lestat and Louis and how Louis kind of holds on more to these mortal concepts, but Lestat really lives in the vampire world. And also because it allows Lestat to sometimes justify his actions because Lestat does feel like a monster. In fact, at one point, Lestat has this line that's just a throwaway line, the way that Sam delivers it. And I thought it was honestly really tragic and beautifully done. And it's that line of, because I'm a monster, Louis. And Louis is asking him, why does he do some of these awful things that he does? And it's just that Lestat sees himself that way. He really struggles with being a vampire and the evil within him and feels as though, I think sometimes he has to be this monster, like he has no choice. It's as though it's something that he doesn't necessarily want to come to pass, but he can't resist the urge. And he even talks about, why does he always fail at everything? Why does he always go into all of these things and then fail? And I think it really is kind of what Louis says with that idea of how, like, that's part of who Lestat is because he puts himself out there and because he is a risk taker and because he lives. To live is to experience the tragedy and the sorrow of life. And Lestat is a person who really loves to live and experience life, who loves to love. I guess the reason that I really love Lestat is that sometimes I see a lot of myself in that character, where you want to do all of these good things, but sometimes things just fall apart and you feel like you have no control and things are chaotic. And you think maybe I am the chaos and maybe I am the problem and maybe I am the monster. But the truth is I think Lestat is really a good person at his core. He just struggles to see that in himself at times, which maybe is why he also needs Louis around to help remind him of those things, to help remind him of the humanity, you know? Because he wants to hold on to it. I think he does. So let's talk about Claudia's ghost, because that's a huge part of this episode. And I mean, I thought maybe we might get this, but then when we got Fraudia, you know, fake Claudia on the scene, I wasn't so sure we were going to get Claudia's ghost. The confrontation with Claudia's ghost is something that happens much later in the Vampire Chronicles. So, you know, we have books to go before we get to that. But I also know for the show, they've said that, you know, if they got to the tale of the body thief and did that one, that would probably be the end. And that's their goal, which means that if we want to get Claudia's ghost in here, we kind of need to do it sooner rather than later. And I feel like this was a beautiful way to do this scene. And I also feel like it's necessary for them to do it sooner because obviously the cast is not made up of vampires. These are people. They will age. They will change. So better to do it right now so that we can keep Delaney's look consistent with what we've seen in Interview with a Vampire. And I thought they did a great job with this scene. I mean, the rage that Claudia feels, it is insane. And Delaney did such a great job of honing that in and holding that. And it's a lot of anger. So it's not easy, I don't think, to dial that in and hold on to it for a scene. She did such a great job. And you have to remember that everything that Claudia is saying here, this is Claudia when she is at her most pained, because it is that Claudia has come up from hell. She's been dragged out of hell by these two people who in her life were not necessarily her favorites of the world. They were not always the kindest to her. They were her tormentors. They were the reason that she was so unhappy in her life, being trapped in the body that she was in for an extended period of time, if she had continued to live for forever. And I think that Claudia ultimately was doomed to lose her mind because of this. And so these are not the people that she wants to see when she's pulled back. And I think it's important to remember that what she says, this is Claudia, the most angry you will ever see her. And I liked it because in Interview with a Vampire, which I recently did a book club on my Patreon where we went back and read Interview with the Vampire. I don't even know how many times I've read that book, so many times. But every time I go back, I always find something new that I really carry with me. And one of the things this time that really stuck with me is that moment where Claudia turns to Louis in the book and she says, you know, I hate you so much. And it's when she's trying to get Louis to turn Madeline for her. And she's real with him and just says, I have this intense hatred for you and I want to let go of it. And I do want to love you, but I can't. And I think there's always been a little bit of ambiguity in terms of how does Claudia really feel about Louis? You know, does she love him? Does she hate him? I think the reality is it's kind of both, right? And I think she feels that way for both of her parents, but also to have her come back and for Louis to have to confront the fact that everything that he has done in her name has been an insult to her, has actually caused more pain and more torment for her as she's watching him live his life and do all of these things in her name that she never asked him to do. And then the other side of it is, not only does Louis find out that she despises him so much and that she used him, but he also finds out that Lestat was basically the favorite parent between them. The person that he thought Claudia hated most, who was a monster. Lestat was a little afraid to see her, but was willing to do it for Louis, but also understands being the preferred parent and also is saddened by that. There's a lot of emotion from everyone, I think, in this scene, and it's so well done. And I love that we also brought in Merrick, and man, is Claudia a feisty ghost. They handled all of that beautifully. And it's good to have it now because that means now we can finally close that chapter probably. That'll probably be the last that we'll see of Claudia because now her story has really ended and Louis and Lestat know where they stood with her. And that's the closure for them. And as I said, maybe they both have some work still to do on themselves. Definitely. Definitely. When you're a vampire that's able to hold on to your humanity, I think you always have work to do on yourself, by the way, because I think that's a very human thing. Speaking of some weird things that are less human, more vampiric in nature, we of course have the confrontation between Gabriella and Louis, who both have this intimate connection to Lestat. And Louis doesn't know that this is Gabriella. He doesn't really know who she is. He knows her as Sophia. And later on, he finds out the truth. And I loved the interaction between Louis and Gabriella. I thought it was beautifully done. This thing of they both kind of like each other, but there is a little bit of an animosity there. There's a little bit of jealousy there, especially, I think, from Gabriella to Louis. She definitely sees him as a person who has really captured Lestat's full attention and affection. And as someone who is more used to Lestat chasing her, now the shoe is on the other foot. And this has changed up their dynamic a little bit, which I think is interesting. And then, of course, there's the whole blow up, the whole fight that we get when Louis realizes that Gabriella was Lestat's mother in her mortal life. And Lestat, of course, is trying to explain how it's different because she's a vampire. She's not really his mother. His mother died. And Gabriella is her own being now. She's not attached to him like she was in her mortal life, which is true. But is it also Lestat trying to justify something that seems completely insane? Yes. And of course, this whole relationship between Gabriella and Lestat is made more taboo by the fact that in this version of the world, vampires actually do have a physical intimacy with each other. That in the books, it's more through the blood that you have something like that. Like I said, vampires can't actually be intimate in that way in the books because their bodies are dead. So they don't work in the same way. So it does mean that, like I was saying earlier, we get this little shift where I do worry at times that a lot of the reason for doing Gabriella and Lestat is because they're missing the point of the importance of that relationship. And they're more focused on, making an audience gasp than they're focused on really understanding and breaking down what that relationship means for those characters. Now, granted, I do think that they still are doing that at times. And I want to say, after watching all the Vampire Lestat After Dark episodes, other than last night's, I have to go back and watch that one. I am really grateful that we have Sam Reed as part of this cast. Look, I know I talk about Sam Reed in every review, but it's important for this because Sam Reed, I think, also kind of acts as a bit of a lore master on the show. And he is the one that is really there fighting for stuff that if we didn't go with what Sam said and we went with what Roland had wanted to do initially, this would be a totally different show. This would be a totally different show, and I don't think I would have liked it as much. So at least there is still some of it that's explored. And like I said, once I realized that it was less about the gasping and it was more about how these two characters look at this in different ways. Louis is a different person than Lestat, and how do these two people that love each other, despite being so different, how do they make it work? I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's just showing you, why they aren't together all the time, but still they have these ties that are eternal. And the fact that Louis is, of course, a fledgling of Lestat, which will intrinsically tie him to Lestat for all of his days, and same with Gabriella. So there is also a little bit of I feel like a fledgling competition between Gabriella and Louis that I kind of like. But let's talk about the super villain of this show this season, Armand. Armand coming in at the end of this episode with Daniel, with Alex, who I knew Alex was going to be taken by Armand and sort of end up on his side of things. Man, we have the three of these vampires coming together to seemingly put a stop to Lestat's plan. And they do so by removing Louis and Lestat's heads from their body. What does this mean? Well, first of all, I want to talk about something else that we see here, and that is Armand and Daniel are daywalking. And I know Armand said to Daniel in the last episode that he wanted to give him that gift, but I'm not really sure where that gift is coming from or how we're getting it, because we've also established in this that apparently Armand has awful blood and he doesn't give any gifts. And so I don't know if it's that Armand has been saving a special reserve of his blood for Daniel. And we are going to acknowledge that Armand has powerful blood. I think he should have powerful blood. I don't remember him having weak blood in the books. But the other potential option here is that somehow they have the blood of Akasha, because you can walk in the daytime in the books, but you have to be a really powerful vampire. And I mean, we see Lestat do it when he's recording his album. You know, he goes out into the light to try to get that perfect take, and it does burn him, but he's able to keep doing it time and time again. So that shows you how strong his blood is. He can go out in the day, but it's not sustainable. But someone that it could be sustainable for is someone that is as old as Akasha. However, when she does it, there is the risk to all other vampires because they are connected to her through the blood. So we'll have to wait and see, you know, how they're able to do this and how they're justifying this in the show. I'm not exactly sure what the story is going to be there, but I can't wait to find out what it is. Also, I feel like it is odd that Lestat and Louis both clocked this and we're like, well, whatever. I love how they so underestimate Daniel that they're like, I don't know, Daniel and Armand, they're weird guys, but like, it's probably fine. We're way cooler than them. We're more powerful than them. We got this. But maybe they don't got this because now their heads are removed from their bodies. So what does that mean? Well, vampires can live with their heads removed from their bodies in the Vampire Chronicles, depending on how powerful that vampire is and, you know, the length of time. And there are some restrictions to who can do that and when that can happen and when it can work. But yeah, I believe it is possible. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly in the books, that did actually happen to Akasha and Enkil, I want to say. Enkil. I believe the both of them had that happen to them when they were not being kept. There is a dark period in their history where they were lost and just lots of people were taking them and abusing them and mistreating them. And obviously that's very dangerous for all vampires on Earth, which is why they do need to be kept for their protection and for the protection of all vampires. I think that Louis and Lestat are probably fine. I'm not too worried, but I do think it's quite a surprising way to end the episode. And sorry to anyone that I maybe spoiled that for. I mean, I have read the books and I do like to talk about them. So we are doing that here. But I think they're going to be fine. And of course, just because something happens in the books doesn't mean that it will happen in the show. So maybe they are very much in danger and I should be worried, but I feel pretty safe still. I think it's going to be an interesting finale and I don't know how Lestat's going to get to his show on time, but I hope he makes his call time. Fingers crossed. That's all I have for this one, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch my review. Let me know your thoughts on this episode down in the comments below. Did you love it? Did you not? Why not? And yeah, let us discuss everything that's happening. Some pretty big changes, but also ones that I think were necessary and some stuff that works really beautifully within the understanding of the characters and what their relationships are really about. So that's where I'm at. I really liked this episode quite a bit. I'll see you all in the next one. And until next time, friends, as always, stay nerdy. Bye. And if you love when I talk about the Vampire Lestat, Interview with the Vampire, the Vampire Chronicles, the Immortal Universe, then you need to click this next.